Patricia Wilkins' neighbors in Westport, Connecticut had a coded alert system for her appearances at local businesses. The Eagle has landed at Starbucks. They text each other, warning of the impending storm of complaints about phone-to-coffee ratios and room temperature milk. At 52, with her signature platinum blonde bob, maintained weekly at a salon where staff drew straws to avoid serving her, and designer sunglasses perpetually perched on her head like a crown, Patricia was legendary. She'd gotten 3 shop managers fired last year alone and considered it community service. Now, Patricia stood in her marble-countered kitchen, surrounded by luxury luggage, as she FaceTimed her equally insufferable friend Deirdre. "I've mapped everything down to the minute," Patricia announced, waving her color-coded itinerary. "Day 3 is Buckingham Palace. I've paid for a VIP experience, and I expect to be treated accordingly." She lowered her voice conspiratorially. "I've even packed the Hermes scarf that matches the Queen's favorite, just in case." What Patricia hadn't scheduled, between her afternoon tea at Harrods and her evening at the West End, was a lesson in humility that would make her an international sensation for all the wrong reasons. On the transatlantic flight, Patricia created such havoc that the flight attendants developed a rotation system to deal with her. "Excuse me," she stage whispered, pressing the call button for the 7th time in an hour, "but I specifically requested no ice, yet I can clearly detect a microscopic fragment in this Diet Coke." Meanwhile, the businessman beside her was frantically trying to change seats, mouthing "help me" to passing crew members. When the pilot announced turbulence ahead, Patricia loudly declared, "Well, I certainly hope the captain knows what he's doing. My cousin's neighbor is a pilot, and he says turbulence is actually completely avoidable with proper planning." Patricia emerged from Heathrow's customs area like a hurricane making landfall. 47 minutes, she announced to no one in particular, brandishing her designer watch. "That's 47 minutes of my vacation wasted. In America, we value efficiency." The British immigration officer she'd just tormented closed his booth for a sudden technical issue, his colleagues shooting him sympathetic glances. Her taxi driver, Mohammed, a London cabbie for 27 years with encyclopedic knowledge of the city's streets, made the grave mistake of attempting friendly conversation. "First time in London? I'll have you know I've been to Europe numerous times," Patricia snapped, not looking up from her phone where she was already drafting a complaint email to Heathrow Airport Authority. "And I can tell you're taking the long route to increase the fare." Mohammed, who had specifically chosen the fastest route given current traffic conditions, merely nodded in his rear-view mirror, adding another tale to his legendary collection of American tourist stories. His relief when they arrived at the hotel was palpable, though short-lived when Patricia demanded a receipt with meticulous detail for tax purposes. The Kensington Grand Hotel had welcomed royalty, celebrities, and diplomats with their signature British discretion and sophistication. None had prepared them for Patricia Wilkins. She cut in front of an elderly couple at reception, slammed her designer handbag on the marble counter, and announced, "Patricia Wilkins, I'm in your computer. I specifically requested a high-floor, north-facing, hypoallergenic room with extra towels. Perfect targets for Patricia. You need to move that stool. It's blocking my view," Patricia demanded, wedging herself between them. "I'm sorry, but we've been waiting here," Mr. Jensen began in accented English. Patricia cut him off. "Do you know how much my tour package cost? More than your flight here, I'm sure." She turned to the little girl. "Sweetie, your daddy can hold you somewhere else." Mrs. Jensen's mouth fell open in shock, while nearby tourists began filming discreetly, sensing imminent disaster. An Australian couple exchanged glances that clearly communicated, "We're witnessing a live one here." As the ceremony began, with its centuries-old pomp and precision, Patricia grew increasingly agitated. "They're just walking back and forth," she complained loudly. "In America, we'd have a light show and maybe some eagles." Patricia's fascinator bobbed dangerously as she ducked under a rope barrier marked "Restricted Area, Do Not Cross," to get a better angle for her selfie. A red-faced American teenager hissed, "Mom, you're embarrassing our entire country." A police constable with the patience of a saint approached. "Madam, you must return behind the barrier immediately." Patricia adopted what she considered her speaking to public servants tone. "I'm taking a quick photo for my Facebook group. Connecticut Ladies Who Lunch. I have 238 members waiting to see this. The barrier isn't a suggestion, ma'am. It's for your safety and... Safety? Please. Those guards are just for show. They're basically Disney characters with better hats." Patricia positioned herself directly in the ceremonial path, her back to the approaching royal guard, fascinator bobbing as she attempted various duck-face poses. The constable's expression transformed from professional patience to the barely suppressed plea of someone about to witness long overdue consequences. "As you wish, madam," he said, stepping back but not too far, his body camera coincidentally activated. The sequence that followed would become the most viewed royal guard interaction since the internet began, surpassing even the famous fainting guard of 2018. In the video, shot from 17 different angles by delighted tourists, Patricia stands center frame in her designer outfit and bobbing Tower of London fascinator, her back to the approaching guard, foam extended on a selfie stick. The guard, Corporal James Blackwood, a 6-year veteran of the Queen's Guard with tours in Afghanistan and Iraq, marched with perfect precision, his bearskin hat adding another foot to his already imposing 6'4" frame. His face remained the epitome of discipline, utterly expressionless despite the spectacle unfolding before him. 8 feet away, Patricia adjusts her pose. 6 feet. A child in the crowd points and tries to warn her. 4 feet. Patricia catches sight of the approaching red uniform in her phone screen and assumes he'll walk around her. "Checking out, Ms. Wilkins?" Amira asked professionally, bracing for complaints. "Yes, but first..." Patricia swallowed hard. "I want to apologize for my behavior when I arrived. It was inexcusable." Amira's perfectly shaped eyebrows rose in genuine surprise. "That's very kind of you to say. And this," Patricia slid an envelope across the counter, "is for the Staff Appreciation Fund. It's not much, but it was, in fact, quite generous, equivalent to half the cost of her stay." Something shifted in Patricia during her final London taxi ride. Mohand had been replaced by Amir, who mentioned he was studying hospitality management at night while driving during the day. "That sounds challenging," Patricia said, actually listening to his response rather than mentally drafting a complaint. As Amir helped with her luggage at Heathrow, Patricia did something she'd never done before, tipped generously and asked his name, wishing him well in his studies. The transformation that began in London continued back in Westport. The neighborhood text alert system fell into disuse as sightings of Patricia making a scene dwindled to zero. Shop workers who'd once stuck behind counters when she entered now found themselves greeted by name and asked about their families. 6 months after the incident, as Patricia now referred to it, she was approached in her local grocery store by a young mother with a starstruck expression. "I'm sorry to bother you," the woman said hesitantly, "but aren't you the lady from the Royal Guard video?" Patricia's face flushed, but instead of denying it, she nodded. "Not my finest moment." "Actually," the woman surprised her, "I wanted to thank you. My teenager was going through an entitled phase, demanding expensive clothes, talking back to teachers. I showed her your video, and we had the best conversation about actions and consequences. It really made a difference." 2 years later, Patricia did something that shocked her Connecticut social circle. She sold her mansion and downsized dramatically, donating most of the proceeds to a scholarship fund for hospitality workers pursuing higher education. When asked why, she'd simply smile and say, "Let's just say a man in a very tall hat taught me the importance of respecting other people's paths." On the 5th anniversary of the incident, Patricia received a mysterious package from London. Inside was a small, expertly crafted replica of a Queen's Guard bearskin hat mounted on a polished stand. The accompanying note, written on Buckingham Palace stationery, read simply, "With compliments from Corporal James Blackwood, Ret., who wishes to thank you for making him the most famous guard since 1837. Your viral moment paid for his children's education." Patricia placed it on her mantle, where it served as both conversation piece and personal reminder that sometimes life's most important lessons come in unexpected packages, or, in her case, at the end of a very official march. 2 feet. Patricia turns, her expression incredulous. "Excuse me," she says in the same tone one might address a waiter who's brought the wrong appetizer. "I'm in the middle of something here." Corporal Blackwood, trained to maintain formation regardless of obstacle, follows protocol to the letter. His parade ground voice, practiced on drill fields to be heard over artillery, crashes like thunder. "Make way, for the Queen's Guard." The sound is so powerful that Patricia's fascinator visibly vibrates. But rather than move, she commits to what bystanders would later describe as the ultimate Karen stand. "How dare you?" She steps closer, one manicured finger raised. "I am an American citizen, and I paid good money for." Corporal Blackwood, following centuries of protocol that predates the existence of her entire nation, continues his march. Patricia, suddenly realizing that 200 pounds of soldier-plus rifle isn't going to yield to her indignation, attempts to sidestep but catches her designer heel in a cobblestone crack. What follows is a sequence so perfectly choreographed it could have been directed by Spielberg. Patricia wobbles, arms windmilling. Her fascinator launches skyward like a small architectural missile. She stumbles backward, directly into the path of a second guard approaching from the perpendicular formation. Attempting to avoid him, she performs an ungainly pirouette that sends her sprawling across the ceremonial grounds. Her designer purse explodes open upon impact, sending lipsticks, credit cards, and a travel pack of entitled attitude wet wipes scattering across the parade ground. The fascinator, completing its majestic arc, lands directly atop a nearby rubbish bin, the tiny Tower of London now crowning an empty Coca-Cola bottle. The crowd's reaction is instantaneous and universal, a collective gasp followed by thunderous applause that tourists would later swear could be heard as far as Westminster Abbey. Children who had been denied prime viewing spots by Patricia's earlier bullying leap with joy. The Danish family's twin girls perform an impromptu victory dance. As Patricia struggles to her feet, mascara streaking her flushed face, Constable Mitchell appears at her elbow. "Having a bit of trouble with protocol, are we?" This is assault." Patricia sputters, attempting to reassemble her dignity along with the contents of her purse. "I want him arrested. I want to speak to his superior officer." "That would be His Majesty the King." The constable replies with exquisite politeness. "I believe his next public audience is scheduled for the opening of Parliament. Shall I add your name to the wait list?" Within 17 minutes, the first video hits TikTok. Within 30, it's on Twitter with the hashtag God's Karen. By dinner, remix versions set to various soundtracks, "Move Bitch Get Out Da Way," proves particularly popular, have garnered over 8 million views. Good Morning America has already booked the Danish family for an interview. Patricia barricaded herself in her hotel room, blinds drawn against a world that had suddenly turned hostile. Room service trays piled up outside her door as she huddled under premium Egyptian cotton sheets, her phone simultaneously her torture device and lifeline to reality. It's reached 34 million views, her friend Deirdre reported via FaceTime, her voice oscillating between horror and poorly disguised glee. "You're even a GIF now." They're calling it "When Entitlement Meets Immovable Object." Patricia scrolled through comments that cut deeper than she'd ever imagined possible. "Tell me you've never faced consequences without telling me you've never faced consequences." The only thing missing was David Attenborough narrating. Here we observe the wild Karen in her natural habitat, asserting dominance over a territory that isn't hers. My 5-year-old saw this and now shouts, "Make way, for the Queen's Guard," whenever I try to cut the crusts off his sandwich wrong. But it was a particular BBC interview with the Danish family that finally pierced her armor of self-righteousness. The twins, innocent and honest as only children can be, described how the angry American lady had ruined their view after they'd waited so patiently. Their father, far kinder than Patricia deserved, said simply, "We teach our children that respect costs nothing but means everything." For perhaps the first time in her adult life, Patricia Wilkins couldn't deflect, couldn't demand to speak to a manager, couldn't blame someone else. The mirror of public opinion reflected a woman she suddenly didn't recognize, or more accurately, didn't want to recognize. On her final day in London, Patricia did something unprecedented. She approached the hotel reception desk where Amira was working. Amira, the elegantly poised desk clerk, whose family had served in hospitality for generations, smiled professionally. "Welcome to the Kensington Grand, Ms. Wilkins. I see your reservation for a standard queen room." "Standard? There must be some mistake." Patricia laughed as if Amira had told a particularly unfunny joke. "I'm a Platinum Plus member of Luxury Suites International." "I'm afraid we're not affiliated with that program, Ms. Wilkins," Amira replied, her calm demeanor masking the warning signals now flashing across her brain. "And unfortunately, we are fully booked for our executive suites due to the International Finance Summit." What followed was a masterclass in escalating entitlement that had other guests simultaneously cringing and surreptitiously recording with their phones. Patricia's voice rose with each rejection until she finally demanded, "Well, can you at least tell me if my room has a view of Buckingham Palace?" "Ma'am," Amara explained with superhuman patience, "Buckingham Palace is approximately 3 miles from here. This is outrageous." Patricia's designer glasses slipped down her nose as she leaned over the counter. "I specifically booked this hotel because of its proximity to the palace." A silver-haired gentleman in a perfectly tailored suit approached. "Is there a problem, Amira?" His name tag identified him as Victor Harrington, General Manager. Patricia's expression transformed instantly. "Finally, someone in charge. Your staff has been completely unhelpful about my accommodations." Victor reviewed the reservation details on the computer screen, then looked at Patricia with a practiced smile that somehow never reached his eyes. "Ms. Wilkins, I see you've booked through discounthoteldeals.com with their special basic economy package." The way he pronounced the discount website's name made it sound like a communicable disease. Patricia emerged from the hotel the next morning like a battlefield commander, armed with her phone, 3 backup power banks, and an outfit she'd specifically chosen for what she called royal-adjacent photos. Her fascinator, a miniature replica of the Tower of London that bobbed precariously with each step, had cost more than her first car. "Taxi!" she shouted, cutting off an elderly woman who had been patiently waiting. "Buckingham Palace. The VIP entrance," she instructed the driver, who exchanged a knowing look with the doorman. Patricia arrived at the palace during peak tourist season, where the changing of the guard ceremony draws thousands. Families had staked out prime viewing locations since dawn, many with excited children on their first trip to London. Patricia surveyed the scene with disdain, muttering about amateur tourists as she marched toward the front. "Excuse me, there's a clue," said a polite British woman in a sensible raincoat. Patricia snorted. "I'm American. We don't do cues." She continued pushing forward, leaving shocked whispers in her wake. The Jensen family from Denmark, parents and twin 8-year-old girls who had saved for years for this trip, had claimed their spot at 5:30 am, equipped with hot chocolate and homemade sandwiches. Mr. Jensen had hoisted one daughter onto his shoulders, while the other stood on a small step stool they'd brought.